Over the course of my last few Omniverse-focused videos, I took some time to defend some Omniverse-exclusive aliens, and explained that despite their flaws and underperformance, that they're still pretty cool additions to the franchise. Now that I've given some props to some of the decisions in Omniverse, I think it's finally time that I give a more negative video, and that is my thoughts on some of the redesigns and treatment of some of the UAF aliens. When you ask a Ben 10 fan what might put them off to Omniverse comparatively with the previous franchises, of course art style is the very first thing you're going to think of. And while there are many design changes you may like or dislike, there are some that are somewhat controversial. You have some that are unanimously really popular, such as Jury Rig or Tidal, but then you may have some that are sort of mixed, like Big Chill or Ghost Freak. Now, if you ask me personally, I love the Omniverse art style, and I do like a lot of the redesigns that we did get, but there are some I also don't like. It's a mixed bag for me. But there are 3 aliens I want to talk about in today's video. Now, while every alien did get a redesign in Omniverse, for some reason there were 3 aliens that had more than one. They had their initial design for Omniverse and then a redesign randomly in the middle of the show. Now when it comes to aliens, their design is only half the fun. But the thing is, with 2 of these 3 aliens, I think they were pretty mistreated in Omniverse, and I wanted to go over exactly how. Those aliens are Swampfire, Chromos, and Rat. Now I have seen some defense for these designs. When I asked people on Twitter what they thought of each of these 3 redesigns, there were a lot of people that disliked it, but there were also some people that actually gave praise to some of these designs, which I can sort of see, which I'll explain with each alien as I go along the video. As for the order of which alien I'll be talking about, I'm gonna go with the redesign that I hate the least, and then the last alien will be the one I hate the most. With that said, the very first alien I want to talk about within this trio is Chromos. Chromos is a crystal sapien from the planet Petropia, the same planet as Diamond Head, and would debut in Alien Force in the episode All That Glitters. I remember when Alien Force was coming out, and when I first saw Chromos' design, I thought to myself how he just looked like another Diamond Head, and I was confused on how he would be different exactly. And the Cartoon Network website didn't really describe the powers of these aliens that well in my opinion, at least for some of them. But as far as his design goes, I'm a big fan of it. I love that his main body is these dark purple segmented rocks, and I love that the pink crystals for his limbs and like the pointy crystals on his body are exposed. He also has a lot more of a lean body type compared to Diamond Head, so when you put them side by side, they are very different despite their similarities. As far as his abilities go, his main one is that he can absorb energy such as lasers and then throw it back at the opponent. Chromos is incredibly durable, can conduct electricity, and in Season 3 of Alien Force, it's revealed that Chromos even has the ability to fly. Chromos can also just generate energy naturally, and is also just able to create any sort of light source, particularly in different colors. I think Chromos kit is one of the more creative ones of the Alien Force 10, considering that the Alien Force 10, as great and iconic as they are, do have a lot of powers that are shared with original series aliens. So let's talk about some of my particular favorite ways that Chromos is utilized in his screen time. As usual, I like to properly start by talking about the alien's debut, which in this case is the episode All That Glitters. There's not much to go over when it comes to Chromos debut. All he really does is show up, conduct electricity for a second, and that's really it. Like, we don't even get that much of like an explanation for his powers other than like he's durable, I guess. I remember when this episode came out and laptops were still like a new thing, that my mom got a laptop for the first time and she let me use it to watch like Ben 10 episodes that were on the Cartoon Network website. So when this episode came out, I rewatched this specific scene just because I was so amazed that Chromos finally showed up, even if he didn't do like jack shit. I don't really consider this like a highlight, but again, I like to talk about their debuts first because I just feel like it's proper to do that. The real start to Chromos highlights in my opinion goes to his second appearance in the episode The Gauntlet. I love this episode. This is easily one of my favorite Alien Force episodes. Like, everything about this is so great. The writing, the pacing, Ben's development, Goop debuting is also really cool, but the Chromos fight with Cash at the end is just a cherry on top of the amazing peak cake. We finally get to see how Chromos abilities work, as we get to see Tekadon lasers being absorbed. I love that the first one that hits Chromos is redirected away from him, kind of like a reflector in Smash Brothers, while the second one he actually absorbs and throws back at Cash. I don't know why, but something about this fight in particular is just so great, even if Chromos doesn't do a whole lot with his special abilities. We get to see more durability from Chromos, being able to withstand getting thrown into a truck and holding his own against Tekadon Cash. I also like Chromos moment in Be Knighted where he absorbs the dragon's laser energy. It's also really nice foreshadowing for the story considering what the actual twist of this episode is. One thing I'm a big fan of is the visuals of Chromos energy abilities. I love that they're very colorful, or sometimes could be somewhat more of a solid color. They're just so pretty, and the fact that they come out in different ways is just so creative to me. One of my all-time favorite examples of this is in the episode Unearthed, where he basically has a whole giant like radiant barrier of light around him. It just looks so pretty. I also love that when he absorbs energy, his whole entire body becomes colorful, so it kind of like implies that all the energy is coursing throughout his entire body. There's also some small moments for Chromostone I really like. For example, in Birds of a Feather, we see the conducting electricity ability come back. In the episode Inside Man, we see Chromostone use his fist to create a flashlight, which I think is really charming. And as mentioned earlier, in Season 3 of Alien Force, Ben learns that Chromostone is able to fly, although we don't see this until the Creature from Beyond, which I think is really fun because usually when it comes to flying, you would see Big Chill or Jet Ray all the time, so it was a nice change of pace. Chromostone also has one of my favorite transformation sequences in all of Alien Force. The way his skeleton becomes all the Chromostone body parts is animated really well. The last couple of highlights I want to mention for UAF Chromostone involve Gwen and her magic. The first of those two episodes is the episode Absolute Power Part 1. Now the entire fight between Ben and Gwen in the beginning of the episode is absolutely amazing, one of my all-time favorite moments of either character. However, we're only going to talk about the Chromostone specific part where he absorbs Gwen's mana and throws it back at her. The fact that he can absorb it makes sense given that mana is life energy, and this could also lead to a lot of cool ideas on how Gwen and Chromostone could work together in battle, though we don't really get to see much of that except for one other instance, and that is in the Ultimate Alien finale, The Ultimate Enemy Part 2. While the results aren't really impactful, seeing Chromostone absorb a bunch of Gwen's mana to become super strong is really cool. I wish we got to see more of such stuff like that. In fact, episodes like Where the Magic Happens and The Enemy and My Frenemy could have done this as well. Overall, I think Chromostone was pretty well liked in the fandom. I never really see anyone talk negative about him, at least in terms of the type of alien he is. However, when it comes to his actual scenes, there is some negative stuff to talk about, and that is the infamous L's of Chromostone. In some ways, Chromostone loses a battle in ways that don't make any sense to people. For example, in the episode Fame, he gets electrocuted despite the fact that he's able to conduct electricity. Then you have the episode Enemy of My Frenemy, where Chromostone's unable to absorb Charmcaster's machine and dies. Actually dies. But the most infamous L of all comes from Vengeance of Vilgax Part 2, where he's shattered by Vilgax and then Ben becomes Diamond Head. Okay, so a quick little tangent from Post-Alizonia here. So basically I wanted to make a little joke that the CN website lied about Chromostone's powers because I could have sworn originally it was supposed to be indestructible. However, when I finally tracked down the original pictures from the 2007 Alien Force website, like the promos and stuff, it turns out he was actually described as nearly indestructible. For nearly 20 years, I was distracted by the fact that I thought originally Chromostone was supposed to be just indestructible, so I was like, how the fuck could he die? And it turns out, no, he was never indestructible, he was only nearly indestructible, and I could have sworn a whole group of people would describe him as indestructible, so I feel like this is some sort of like Mandela effect, and I can't be the only one, right? Like, just let me know if you also could have sworn it said indestructible. Like, I could have sworn that everyone was saying that, and it turns out that wasn't the case at all. Now, as far as in defense of Chromostone and his L's, I think that every alien does have their moments of just getting outclassed, which is fine, honestly. I think it's more interesting if Ben wasn't OP all the time, of course. But as far as like Chromostone specific, in the episode Fame when he gets electrocuted, I remember Kuro from the Ink Tank brought up the fact that, oh, maybe he just can't really absorb electricity if he's not concentrating. I guess we were under the assumption that Chromostone just absorbs energy all of the time, like his body will just do it without volunteering to do it, but we can see in Fame that that's not the case. And in the case of Enemy of My Frenemy, I guess he just has an energy limit, so if he absorbs too much, it starts to hurt. Also, this isn't like an L for Chromostone, but I really want to mention this, and I have no idea where the fuck to put it. I just want to bring up this really silly running animation he has in Good Copy, Bad Copy. This animation always bothered me as a kid. Like, what the fuck is he doing? How is he able to balance? He has such tall, like, thin legs, and he has like this, like, his torso's just overarching like a fucking hunchback. Who runs like this? How do you do this? He runs like one of those villains in a 2012 copypasta that was turned into a fan game. Now, of course, I could bring up the whole Secret of Chromostone thing. I didn't really talk about that yet, and honestly, I don't feel like talking about my thoughts on the episode here because this is about Chromostone specifically, not his lore. But if you do want my opinion on that, I will say TLDR version that I think that he should have been from the planet Morotesi instead, because I think that was a lot more interesting. If you want to know my further thoughts on it, I have a whole video where I talked about Ben 10 lore that was retconned, so check that out if you want. Overall, I think Alien Force and Ultimate Alien utilized Chromostone incredibly well. While I think he could have had a little bit more to do and a lot more use of his powers, I still think that he had a lot of really iconic and fun scenes. Some examples of some other cool stuff that Chromostone could have done would come from the video games. In Vilgax Attacks, Chromostone has some abilities I think are really cool and would have been fun to see in the show. One example is that he creates a barrier around himself and can move around, giving him a shield at all times. And my favorite of his offensive attacks is Prismatic Explosion, where he creates basically the magic burst from Dragon Quest. Like, it's so pretty. I can't get over how great Chromostone's visuals are. As for his audios, I think the energy stuff is pretty cool, and his voice is also really great, as he's played by D. Bradley Baker. His voice gives me robot vibes without actually being a robot. Let me know if you hear it as well.
It doesn't have to be this way, Cash. Neither of us wins anything by fighting. Just stop! Indestructible super dense silicon, guys. Yeah? What do you think Kevin's doing while you're wasting my time? Give him a break. He's 2,000 years old, and he's been fighting ninjas all day. Of course he's tired.
With the UAF era out of the way, let's talk about Chromostone in Omniverse, and we're gonna see how exactly they mistreat him and his eventual glow down from an appearance perspective. As mentioned before, Chromostone has two designs. His first design is completely identical to his Alien Force counterpart, except that he just has the Omniverse art style, and the crystals on his body are a little longer. His second design, however, is pretty drastic. Okay, so there's a little bit to unpack here, so let me start with the stuff I actually do like. I actually don't mind his face. I kind of fuck with it, to be honest. I like the horns on the side, and I like the mouth guard thing. That's actually pretty cool, I can't lie. And I also think that the spikes on his elbow and knees and his shoulders are all cool. I think that stuff is perfectly fine. It's really the clothes that kind of bother me. Honestly, I won't lie, if he didn't have any clothes at all, and he just had the badge on his chest as usual, and they had like maybe more spikes on his chest or something. There's, I don't know, a bunch of spikes. I don't know, fuck it, spikes everywhere. I actually would say this design would have been better than his UAF counterpart, but the clothes really fuck it up for me. Of the three redesigns that we're going to talk about today, this is my least hated of them because I honestly see a lot of potential for his design. I still prefer UAF Chromostone, but I actually don't mind his design as much as the other two. As far as his screen time, we get to talk about every Omniverse appearance because out of the 80 episodes he has, he only has 2. His first being in Season 1, and then his second and final appearance being all the way at the last episode of Omniverse. His first appearance is in Trouble Helix, where he helps Blukage and Driba test out some equipment by shooting lasers at him, where it doesn't really affect him. In his second and final appearance in A New Dawn, Chromostone, with the assistance of Skirt and a Celestial Sapien arm, takes the Annihilarg and tries to stop it before it blows up. A real shame that one of my top 5 aliens did not get to do jack shit in Omniverse. Considering how amazing Omniverse is visually and animation-wise and everything, and given how pretty Chromostone was in UAF, I have no doubt in my mind that if Chromostone got to appear, the visuals would have looked spectacular. The only example we really get is this laser shot in A New Dawn, which looks okay, but if Chromostone was given a lot more appearances, I think he would have easily have been an S tier in terms of visuals alone. As for his voice in Omniverse, it's Eric Bauza, who does a pretty good job with him. Since we didn't really get too much time for him in Omniverse, you don't really get much time to actually get used to his new voice, but it doesn't really sound that different from Dee's performance anyway.
Holy moly! It's Chromostone! Nice! Turd! You slimy genius! Sorry, I called you a snot rocket.
Between the two voices, I think Dee does the better job, but it's also because we have so much more to go off of compared to Eric's performance. When it comes to his appearance, I do think, again, that it's the least worst of the three, but in terms of actual treatment in the show, I think between the 3 aliens we're going to talk about, I think he has the worst of it. Having only one cameo and then an appearance in the final episode where he doesn't even technically save the day does kind of suck. In fact, now that I think about it, that's also what happened in Ultimate Alien. He appears, you think he's going to save the day, and he doesn't really save the day. Wow, okay, so add that also to the L of Chromostones. Now, of course, one obvious reason Chromostone may have gotten mistreated in terms of screen time in Omniverse is because of one alien known as Feedback. Feedback also has energy absorption abilities and would become a mainstay in Omniverse. I guess because they really wanted Feedback to be a fan favorite, they figured that putting Chromostone in some episodes would highlight the fact that their abilities are incredibly similar. Although given the fact that some aliens with similar abilities were still given a couple of episodes to shine, I still think that Chromostone deserved 2 or 3 more appearances. Now, if you want my thoughts on Feedback in particular, I have a video where I talked about all the electric aliens, but to TLDR that one, I think that Feedback is cool, but Chromostone is cooler. Now, Chromostone not getting any screen time due to Feedback being a thing may not be the most valid reason. I could at least understand why it would be a reason, but in actuality, that's not the case at all. There are 3 reasons as to why Chromostone didn't appear, at least according to the Ben 10 wiki. The first one being that he didn't show up in any story meeting, so similar to Humongous vs. Growth Power, they just plain forgot. The second is that he didn't have a proper redesign until A New Dawn, even though he clearly didn't need one, he was perfectly fine before. Don't fix what isn't broken. And finally, similar to Brainstorm barely having any screen time, he also suffered from low toy sales, which I also call bullshit on because I think Chromostone's toys were pretty cool. But anyways, overall I think you can make a very good case for Chromostone's redesign being actually not the worst thing in the world. There are qualities I do really like, even if it has more spikes than Megaman 4. So on the appearance totem pole, I think he's on the top, where he has the best treatment of the 3. The next alien we're going to talk about is what I think is in the middle of the 3 designs, being not the worst or the best, but one I really dislike, and that is the alien Rat. Wrath is an Apoplexian from the planet Apoplexia, and would first appear in the episode Con of Wrath. Wrath would be the very last alien added to Alien Force, and would have a whole episode to show off what he was like and what he can do. As far as his abilities go, none of it is really super unique, as he has super strength like Forearms or Humongosaur did prior, and he does have claws, which I think are kind of cool that he has only a singular claw on each hand, which makes him feel a little more alien given that his design is just a muscular tiger. But what Wrath lacks in intricate design, he makes up for in entertaining personality. The main thing about Wrath is his aggression and anger management, which he has none of. In fact, before we even get to his scenes, I want to talk about his voice, because his voice by John DiMaggio is easily the best part about him. Every tangent, every funny dialogue, every single line of Wrath is so entertaining. I can only show off so many clips, but trust me when I say this, every scene of him is just so fun.
Let me tell you something, Matty Armstrong. You want a piece of Wrath? You got a piece. But you just bit off an eye that's bigger than your stomach can chew. That all you got, stolen plumbership? Because Wrath's got tons more. In fact, I should give you some of mine so it'll be a fair fight. And after that, everything I gave you, I can take it back again and make you like it. Eating babies is not cool!
Now, if his voice is entertaining, can the same be said for his screen time? Absolutely. With his first appearance, we have Con of Wrath, where he's in pretty much almost the entire episode. We get stuff that you would expect from an aggressive alien, such as yelling and picking fights, but what I like about Wrath's fights is that not only are they stylistic because of wrestling moves, which we'll see later on, but also because they add a little bit of comedy into each of the fights that you wouldn't see from aliens like Forearms. While we do get a lot more funnier and more creative scenes later on, I do love seeing Wrath fight while having a plate of food in one hand. That's a little funny. Wrath is also so aggressive that he's willing to commit murder as he sends one of the incursions into a black hole, which honestly deserved, but it's also like, goddamn. We also get this cool shockwave thing that Wrath does with his claws when against Volcanus and his minions. And how could I not mention the iconic scene where he goes inside of Jared to pull the baby Tiffin out and basically threatens him if he ever eats him again. I love that scene. While the episode in terms of quality may vary for some, I think that Wrath made a very good impression and would become a fan favorite in the series. I may have mentioned this before, but one thing I'm doing is introducing a lot of my family to all of Ben 10, and I told my grandfather how Hulk Hogan was sort of like an inspiration for Wrath, so every time he appears he just calls him the Hulkster, which I really love. With a great first impression, let's see how Wrath does in his future appearances throughout all of Alien Force and Ultimate Alien. Wrath doesn't have too many appearances in Alien Force given that he was introduced in the middle of Season 3, but the ones that he does have are still pretty neat. In his second appearance in Primus, he's used by Azimuth, which isn't super crazy or anything, but there are two things I like. One is Azimuth with Wrath's voice. I think that's kind of funny.
Let me tell you something, Vilgax, conqueror of 10 worlds. Azimuth will defeat you. Azimuth will hunt you down even though you're standing right here. You are no match for the awesomeness of Azimuth. The other is that he uses his claw that slices a giant boulder in two to throw 2 rocks at Vilgax instead of 1. It may not seem like much to a lot of you guys, but to me, I think it's kind of cool, even if it's very simple. He has an okay fight scene in Vendetta, you know, that's neat and everything. However, the one appearance that I absolutely love for Wrath in Alien Force is the episode Above and Beyond. The fight between Wrath and Manny is so much fun, and this is our first introduction to Wrath's wrestling moves. My absolute favorite is Sirius butt kicking because it makes me think of Sirius from Fire Emblem. But he also does this pile driver and suplex that are just so cool to look at. That's the one thing I really love about Wrath. I may have mentioned this in a previous video, probably in Humongosaurs, but I like that Wrath, despite having super strength like Forms or Humongosaur, has a twist where he has this wrestling motif, and he just has this aggressive personality that makes him feel very different compared to the aliens I just mentioned. Going into Ultimate Alien, since there's a lot more appearances that Wrath could be in, they take full advantage and give him a lot of fun scenes. While Duped may be a pile of shit of an episode, the opening with Wrath is pretty fun, and seeing him answer a cell phone is pretty funny as well, even if it doesn't make any sense how he has one, but I couldn't give 2 shits. Not to mention seeing Wrath throw the tank in frustration while the 2 old men on the bench don't give a fuck is really funny too. The race against Captain Nemesis in Hero Time is pretty fun, and seeing Wrath put Nemesis in an ankle lock is a nice subtle way to show off more of his wrestling capabilities, and just the fact that he wrestles in general. What I like about Wrath is that a lot of his scenes are bite-sized, which are a lot of fun, but he doesn't take up too much time so he doesn't overstay his welcome, so when he does have a major scene, it's a lot more fun and special because of that. There are 4 final scenes I want to talk about in terms of Ultimate Alien that I think Wrath really shines when it comes to his dialogue and his fighting. The first of those scenes is Prisoner 775 is missing. When the prisoner steals a plumber ship, Wrath chases after it, and seeing him talk with the ship as if it's a person is really
fucking funny. This is easily one of my favorite Raph scenes. Also, the fact that Raph can survive such a huge fall is crazy. Like, that has to be some of the best durability we've ever seen from an alien that has like no types of rocks or armor or anything. Also, the fact that there's a Raph-sized shape hole and Raph acknowledges that is so fucking funny to me. The next scene I want to talk about is in the episode Greetings from Tekadon. This is where I really think Raph's wrestling moves shine in the UAF era. We get suplexes, arm bars, and my favorite, off the top rope into a cross chop straight from Incineroar, even though Raph did it first. Then we have A Night to Remember. This sword is a little shorter than the ones I just mentioned, but I still really like this scene. First of all, we get Raph being more animalistic, running on all fours, which is pretty cool. Then we see him stop a moving truck all by himself, which is also really cool. Also, as small as it is, seeing him stab through a glass window with his claw is really cool. What can I say? I'm easy to please. Also, this may be me cornplate tweeting a little bit, but I really like that even though Raph alters Ben's personality so much, it's not like he's a completely different person. Like, for example, when Gwen scolds him for being really angry, Raph will actually apologize. Hell, in Duped, he even whispers to Gwen on the phone because he doesn't want to be too mad at her.
Let me tell you something, Gwen Tennyson. I was on my way there when I saw this tank pull up to the museum, and...
I don't care. Get here.
That was harsh.
Oh, for crying out loud. Ben!
What? Sorry.
I also like that while he can be way too aggressive, which could be a weak point for him as he's not very smart, he still takes time to save people, so he's not completely blinded by rage, as he prioritizes making sure that the unconscious plumber is safe instead of going after Conduit Edwards, which, by the way, I had to Google his name because I could not for the life of me remember if it was Edwin or Edward or whatever the fuck. What a nothing burger of a villain. As for the final scene, it technically doesn't involve Ben, but instead Gwen. As in Inspector 13, the main gimmick of that episode is Kevin and Gwen turning into Ben's different aliens. While seeing them turn to all different aliens is really fun, and I know a lot of people enjoy, say, the Kevin as Wild Mutt sequence and everything, my absolute favorite goes to Gwen as Raph. Hearing Ashley Johnson with Raph's voice is just such a charming, fun performance. I love it so much. Dare I say, some of the absolute best of Raph's dialogue in the entire franchise.
Raph! Let me tell you something, unstoppable Tekadon battle robot! You should have quit while you were still ahead! You want a piece of me? You want a piece of me? Let me tell you something, talky voice that nobody ever sees. We're gonna bash these stupid robots all day long so Ben can fix the hump so he can fix the stupid watch!
Boy, am I stupid.
Let me tell you something, Benjamin Kirby Tennyson! Everybody knows that!
Overall, Raph was so much fun in the UAF era. I think he's an alien for me that isn't necessarily like my top 10, but definitely my top 20. Like, he's too iconic not to have somewhere within that range. There's a reason he's a fan favorite, and it's not just because of his powers, even if they're not super creative, but it's because of his fun personality. And once again, I have to give props to John DiMaggio. Without his voice, I feel like Raph would not nearly be as iconic as he is. He really does know how to do the fun, aggressive, wrestling, angry type of voice. It's just so peak. With all that said, we now go into Omniverse, and in terms of treatment, I think he got the best of the three that we're going to talk about, at least when it comes to screen time. But let's first talk about his design. Now, to be super technical, Raph actually has 3 designs because for some reason he has white teeth in his first Omniverse appearance, but then yellow teeth in the rest of them. I couldn't really give a shit, but I figured I would mention it before someone in the comments does. But yeah, if you look at his first Omniverse design, it's pretty much identical to UAF, except he's a lot more muscular, and that's really about it. Then I think his eyebrows might be bigger, but I'm not entirely sure on that one. So they figured, okay, Raph's design is good enough, let's not change it, just to eventually change it, but we'll get to that later on. Let's talk about Raph's screen time with his first design. Now, I'm not going to name too many appearances for Omniverse Raph because something I noticed is that there's a bit of a lost in charm between UAF and Omniverse. Now, I'm not saying I don't enjoy Raph's screen time, I still think he's a lot of fun to watch, but like I said, there's a bit of a charm loss which I want to explain. What really made Raph so entertaining was the fact that he was very stylistic and funny. Omniverse understood this, but almost to a fault. What is something that Omniverse has that the other 3 previous series have as well, but not nearly to the same extent? Comedy. I think that Omniverse is great, and I love a lot of the jokes that are told in Omniverse, but when it comes to Raph specifically, they try to make him even more comedic than he already was, and I don't know, maybe I'm just negative about it, but I don't think it really works for him. Don't get me wrong, I get the idea, and you know, it's not something I passionately hate or anything, but Raph acting way more cat-like in Omniverse compared to UAF is so jarring to me. It's not so bad when it's episodes like Gone Fishing where he's just afraid of water and doesn't like to be in it, but then you have Catfight where he acts like a complete regular cat. And I know I already talked about how much I actually really enjoyed this episode despite its unpopularity, but some of my only downsides do have to do with Wrath. To be fair, these are the only 2 times that this actually does happen in Omniverse, and you can argue this is just a nitpick really, especially considering that in Catfight, since he's being mind controlled, he's just probably acting even more cat-like than usual, but I don't know, just something I thought I'd share anyway. Now, as for the other reason why I feel like some charm was lost between UAF and Omniverse, it all has to do with his scenes in general. Remember how I said one of the great things about UAF Wrath is the fact that a lot of his screen time was bite-sized, meaning that when he did have major scenes, they were more special. His bite-sized moments are pretty decent in Omniverse, I suppose, but the thing is that both his bite-sized moments and any sort of major moment he may have doesn't really feel very Wrath for the most part. His first appearance in Omniverse in It Was Them was pretty good, and while the opening in Many Happy Returns is low-key dumb for me, I do have a soft spot for it. I think one of the reasons why I feel like Wrath loses some of his charm is because Omniverse is very comedic or cartoony in general compared to the previous series, and the thing is, in UAF, Wrath felt like a cartoon character, which I know sounds really dumb because, you know, Ben 10 is a cartoon, but I mean when you compare Wrath to everyone else in the show. In Omniverse, he just feels like another character, and again, he's still great, it's just that it's just not as charming as before. If I can give any credit, there are 2 things I want to point out. One is that Wrath is still pretty funny when it comes to his dialogue. Omniverse does have some of my favorite let me tell you somethings in all of Wrath's screen time.
Let me tell you something, new alien partner that I never wanted in the first place, but I'm begrudgingly beginning to like, in spite of myself. Let me tell you something, self-proclaimed greatest huntsman in the galaxy. Wrath is not humongousaur, but Wrath is gonna make you humongousauri.
Get him, Mr. Fluffykins!
Let me tell you something, lady. Your wish is my command and all, but Wrath is not entirely comfortable with being called Mr. Fluffykins.
The other is that unfortunately a lot of his wrestling motifs don't feel nearly as iconic here as they did in UAF, but I can give credit to the fact that I feel like his athleticism was more emphasized here. He moves a lot more animalistic here, and it's actually really cool to see. Now there is one more major appearance before Wrath's redesign that I do want to talk about, and that is the episode Food Around the Corner. Okay, so you were probably expecting this, but yeah, I really do need to talk about this episode before we get into his redesign. Now the episode as a whole is pretty okay. I got nothing really bad to say about it. However, the one thing I do not like is the Apoplexian lore introduced here, which isn't really lore per se, but is a very unfunny joke that ends up causing Wrath's redesign. Essentially, in this episode, Ben learns that Apoplexians wear clothes, which means that all this time, Ben has been using Wrath completely nude. So let me think of why this joke doesn't really work. Well, besides the fact that it's really unfunny, let's see. Oh, I know. Notice anything about the aliens you see here? That's right, not a single ounce of clothing. And if you want to argue maybe, well, that was in UAF, what about Omniverse? Everyone has a suit for the most part. That is fair, but also look at aliens like Upchuck, or what about Waybig? You got some aliens that only wear a single strap or a belt, and you're gonna tell me that's clothing? This joke is just really dumb and unneeded. Speaking of dumb and unneeded, let's finally talk about Wrath's redesign in Omniverse during Season 8. Okay, so I understand what they were trying to go for. Wrath is a bit of a wrestler. He has wrestling moves, why not make his outfit like a wrestler? The only thing that I don't mind in this design is his gloves. I don't like the outfit, I don't like the shoes, I do not like the mask, I just think this is so stupid. The only reason this isn't my least favorite design in terms of the 3 redesigns is because of a reason I'll get into later on. But as it stands, I just think this design sucks. Now, can I say the same for at least the scene that this redesign comes into play? Honestly, I could not give 2 shits. Ben uses him, he reacts to his outfit, you know, he fights Exoskull and everything, but the only difference is that he's speaking Spanish for no random reason at all, honestly.
Pantalones, ropa. ¡Viva los pantalones luchadores! Wrath estaba muy cansado de estar desnudo. Muchas gracias, chiquillo verde mocoso monstruo.
Donata.
And he doesn't really do much wrestler stuff in his wrestling outfit. All he really does is have Skurd give him a Heat Blast Spike Ball, and he fights Exoskull for a bit. It just feels like this design was so shoehorned in. I wouldn't really mind that if his design didn't suck. Overall, I think that Wrath was treated the best when it came to screen time because unlike Chromos and Swampfire, who we're going to get into in a second, he actually had time to shine. Sure, I don't think his scenes are super spectacular, but they're still entertaining for the most part at least. That just leaves us with the final alien of today's video, and my personal favorite of the 3, at least when it comes to the actual alien itself. That is, of course, Swampfire. Swampfire is a Methanosian from Methanos and would first appear in the Alien Force premiere, Ben 10 Returns Part 1. Swampfire has the ability to shoot fire and control plants. He also has the ability to regenerate his body. So in simple terms, you can describe him as a combination of Heat Blast and Wildvine. Despite the simplification of his powers, he's actually really fucking cool. He is easily one of my absolute favorite aliens in the entire franchise. In fact, he's number 2, just behind Snarrow. But before we actually get into how Swampfire is as an alien, let's talk about his design. I absolutely love his character design. One of my absolute favorite things is the petals on his body. The fact that he has red and yellow being the colors of fire, but also the colors of peppers, considering that he's a fire plant alien, is so clever to me. I love the shade of green he is, and I love like all the lines to indicate like that he isn't like this like beautiful plant. He's like this murky, mucky swamp creature. I love that his feet are like, you know, the roots of a tree and stuff, and the black rocks all over his body are just so cool. I don't actually know if these are supposed to be rocks, but that's what the Ben 10 wiki describes it as, so okay, sure, they're rocks. And before we even talk about his scenes, I do want to talk about Swampfire's voice, because this alien has my absolute favorite voice performance of any alien in the entire show. Swampfire is played by D. Bradley Baker, and it may not seem like it's the most coolest voice of any of the aliens. I'm sure it's not everyone's favorite, but for me, I just love it so much, and I can't exactly explain why, but just here's some clips of him talking. I love his voice so much.
I know I'm one to talk, but it smells like something died in here. Why don't you guys get a room? This place is full of them! Swampfire!
Ben, that's overkill.
No, it's Swampfire. I don't have an alien named Overkill, because if I did, I'd, shout, Overkill!
Now that we covered the design and the voice of UAF Swampfire, let's talk about his screen time in the UAF era. Starting of course with his debut in Ben 10 Returns Part 1. The thing I love most about this appearance for Swampfire as a debut is that most of the cool stuff he does is low-key not even stuff that involves his main powers. One thing about Swampfire I feel like is never really highlighted is just how genuinely strong he is. It's really small, but in his first appearance he takes a pole from the ground and just knocks an entire truck off course, which I think is so underappreciated. And in his second appearance in Everybody Talks About the Weather, he roots himself into the ground in order to push a weather tower. Like, that's crazy, because that's something you would expect from like Humongousaur or Way Big. But no, you get it from Swampfire. It just shows how he's just so much stronger than he looks. To backtrack to his first appearance, I love a lot of the ways they introduce his powers. The first thing they introduce, first and foremost, besides his smell, is the fact that he can regenerate. But the way it's animated and the way it just regenerates back into his body and Ben's reaction to it is just so good.
You guys are in so much trouble.
He shoots his fireballs, which is pretty standard, and the way he goes underground to root himself back up and the way he forms himself back from like the vines into his own regular body is really cool. I love the animations of UAF Swampfire. Although Swampfire is basically a combination of Heat Blast and Wildvine in terms of his powers, I think he fights differently enough to where he warrants being his own alien. I can't make as much of a defense when it comes to Swampfire's comparisons to Heat Blast. There are different ways of fighting, such as Heat Blast being a lot more airborne, but comparatively to Wildvine, I think there's a lot more differences. When Wildvine fights with his plant powers, it's more so with his own body, which Swampfire does do a little bit of, but Swampfire is more so controlling plants to command them, sort of like a little army. I like that Swampfire throws seeds on the ground first to sprout plants to fight for him. In a way, it's kind of like he's summoning his own living garden, and yes, I know plants are already alive, but I couldn't think of a better phrase, so whatever. I also really like that Swampfire regenerates in different ways. We already saw how he regenerates in Ben 10 Returns Part 1, but I also like in other ways how it's animated, such as in Vengeance of Vilgax Part 2, where you see his entire body and like his rib cage and everything. It's really cool. Or in other episodes like Simple, where it's more warpy looking. I don't know a good way to describe it, but I think it looks kind of neat there as well. But those are more general things I like about Swampfire. Let's talk about more scenes specifically that I really enjoy him in. The next one we're going to talk about is X equals Ben plus 2. We get another really cool shot of regeneration, him being immune to lasers and shit, and he just aura farms here low-key, so I fuck with this scene.
Blowing up the world's for big kids only.
One of his most iconic scenes that I see a lot of people talk about when praising Swampfire is Alone Together. He is used twice in this episode. The first time is okay, he shoots fire at some bugs, but the second time is a really creative use of his powers. After Ryan Rasek III saves Ben from an alien bug, his arm gets cut off, so Ben uses Swampfire to heal him by regenerating his old arm and fusing him with Methanosian DNA. Whenever an alien has any sort of regenerative powers, we always see them heal themselves, which makes sense, that's what regeneration is. But seeing Swampfire heal another alien with a detached limb no less is pretty amazing. There are some other small moments I really like. For example, in Ghost Town, Swampfire uses like his fingers and his toes to like burrow underground. That is very interesting looking. I don't know what about it is so cool to me, but it just feels so unique compared to Wildvine, who's also a plant alien, even though he's done stuff similar. I also really like his little moment in If All Else Fails. Visually, it could have been a little better, but the fact that he was able to control the entire giant plant hybrid failsafe was really cool. Another small moment I really like is in the final battle part 1, when Albedo uses Swampfire to fight Gwen. I like how his plant powers are shown there, and I also like that he uses sleeping gas, something we never really see from Swampfire. There is one scene that I used to think was very odd because a lot of people were like very baffled by it, and it's become sort of an infamous scene if you're on Ben 10 Twitter at all. In the episode Plumber's Helpers, there's a scene where Ben gets sucked into the null void, but then he's able to escape with Swampfire, and it's just so random because we don't see how he does it, we just see him crawl out of the projector as Swampfire. Now, many have argued that this scene doesn't make any sense, and it probably still doesn't. But here's the thing that I noticed that maybe I'm wrong in, maybe I'm cornplay tweeting, but one of the scenes I really like in Season 3 is the fight between Swampfire and Goop. In that scene, we see Goop uses a UFO in order to cut Swampfire into little pieces, and when Swampfire is starting to regenerate, he stretches his arm out to grab Goop's UFO. Who says that he can't stretch his arms to also get out of the null void projector? Now that I think about it, in Ghost Town, since he stretches his fingers and toes, he probably did that to get out of the projector as well. As far as Ultimate Alien goes, there's not any like major Swampfire moments that I feel like I really enjoy. Like, I still enjoy a lot of his screen time, obviously, he's one of my favorite aliens, and I do like seeing him use his plant powers and his fire and regenerating and everything, and he has some silly moments too, like in Prisoner 775 is Missing, where Swampfire's at a campfire talking about his name shouting, or in The Eggman Cometh, where all the little dinosaurs pile on top of him because he's a nonchalant swamphead. This is also really small, but I like how sometimes certain things out of Ben's control can affect his regeneration. For example, in Single-Handed, after Sunder's axe cuts off Ben's hand, he can't regenerate with the other hand because it's not attached to him technically. Or in the episode Catch a Falling Star, where Ben breaks his arm, so Swampfire, when transformed, has a really weak, thin arm. I can't think of any Ultimate Alien scenes specifically that are like super iconic on the level the Alien Force's Swampfire moments, but I will say that in the episode Simeon Says, I like how his plant powers are used there more than other episodes. It's nothing super crazy, but I like when Swampfire is being cornered by the DNA alien Eunice. The roots summon from beneath the floor, which is really cool to me. Again, it's super simple, I know, but I really like it. What's there not to love about UAF Swampfire? He has a great design, a great voice, a lot of cool powers, and a lot of cool moments. So can we say the same for Omniverse? Well, given our track record with Chromostone and Wrath, there's a 50-50, and unfortunately, Swampfire leans more to the Chromostone side of things than the Wrath side of things. Let's discuss how Swampfire is handled in Omniverse. Of course, the first thing we're going to talk about is his first design in Omniverse, which is pretty much identical to UAF with a few differences. The main difference is that his Omnitrix is now on his stomach instead of his chest. He has a few more petals, including some on the sides of his legs, that are actually pretty neat touches, and he has like these little weird swirls on his knees. Honestly, if Swampfire appeared more in Omniverse, I'm not gonna lie, over time I feel like that design would have won me over instead of UAF. But the thing is, we barely get any time for it, to the point where anytime we see pre-Blossom Swampfire in Omniverse, which is like pretty much never, it feels like it's edited in. His voice is still the same, so even though they unfortunately changed his design later on, they knew that D. Bradley Baker was perfect for Swampfire, so I'm glad they kept him. With that said, his design is pretty much really good. It's still great, it's not UAF, but I still really like it. But unfortunately, his screen time sucks ass. Now, thankfully, Swampfire has more appearances than Chromostone, which isn't hard to do considering Chromostone only had 2 appearances. But Swampfire isn't much better. Instead of only 2 appearances like Chromostone, Swampfire gets double, so he only gets 4 appearances, technically 3 because one of them is a lineless cameo that lasts about 1 second. In fact, his first appearance in Omniverse has no lines either. The first time we see Swampfire in Omniverse is Have I Got a Deal for You, where he tries to fight off the Screechet a little bit, and it doesn't really go that well, but, you know, it's great to see him at least. His next appearance is that lineless cameo I talked about, which is Return to Forever. Also, this is a small tangent, but it's kind of funny how Return to Forever was this close to having all of my top 4 aliens in this episode, because Swampfire has the cameo, Snaro's in this episode, and so is Lodestar, but we don't get Accelerate, so we were this close. Then there's his third appearance, which finally gives us the Blossom design. So these are all of the different designs we see in the episode Charmed, I'm sure. It's kind of like seeing a Pokemon evolve, but it's kind of like seeing a Pokemon you like evolve, and then the form that they evolve into is like worse than the form they were prior. It's honestly a little heart-wrenching. Now, I see some defense for these different stages and the Blossom design all the time, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to talk about the different stages because they're barely any different, honestly, but I figured I showed them anyway just to clarify that I know that they're there. But now we finally get to talk about the Blossom design. Okay, so let me talk about the things that I actually like about this design, which is not much. I don't mind the like spikes on his arms that are like the red and yellow. They kind of remind me of the petals he used to have, but they're more like the spikes of Chromos in a way. And I think the fingers are pretty cool looking, but everything else just does not sit right with me. I think the worst part is easily his face. I don't know, man. It doesn't have that charm that Swampfire's face has. Like, I never noticed it, but when I look at it, it reminds me so much of Humongousaur's, especially like the chin area, and it's just like, this is such an uninteresting redesign. I could kind of see what they were going for with the collar to make him kind of look like a flower or like a plant that's blossomed. I get that, but it just does not work in my opinion. And I know this is going to sound really weird from a vampire design defender and everything, but the shade of green here is too much. I know that sounds so hypocritical, but for Swampfire specifically, I don't like the shade of green being here when he had like the swampy olive green beforehand. So yeah, I don't like this design, and honestly, I consider this the worst of the 3 redesigns. Not because it's the worst looking, I think that goes to Wrath, but the thing is that on a principle standpoint, I think Swampfire is the worst because Swampfire's design was already so peak, and the thing is that, okay, they have this Blossom design, so you're going to expect them to use this design a good amount of times to show off the new and improved Swampfire, which they fucking don't, because after Charmed I'm Sure, he only gets one other appearance. But before we get to that, let's talk about how he's used in Charmed I'm Sure. So Blossom Swampfire appears and he's able to control the pumpkin creatures, so, you know, that's kinda cool, and seeing the giant vine spike wall is really cool too. You know, I don't mind the stuff he does, it's really just the look of him I cannot fucking stand. But my bigger issue with Swampfire's redesign being so pointless is with his other appearance in Weapon 11 Part 2. The fact that they give us this redesign that's supposed to be new and improved just to appear in one other episode where he fights a mutated Kevin pretending to be evil, getting his ass kicked, is just so disappointing. If he had other scenes besides this, maybe I'd be a little bit more kinder to this redesign, but I know it's very, very nitpicky and anal, but it's just how I feel, honestly. To give any sort of credit, the vines that he spawns in this fight is actually pretty cool looking, and if we actually had artwork or other scenes of him using this, I probably would really fuck with this. It kind of reminds me of the Rose Sword from Castlevania Circle of the Moon, or maybe the Thorn Whip from Portrait of Ruin. In a way, I also really like that these whips are the reason why Kevin has the scar that we see from Kevin 11,000, so I thought that was kinda cool. But yeah, Swampfire was handled terribly in Omniverse. Like, yeah, the small stuff we do get is okay, but the thing is that the design sucks, he's barely in it, and it's crazy because he was such a mainstay in UAF, and I get it, they want to give the time to the aliens that we haven't seen him in forever, and all that stuff, but I feel like you could have still fit him in on a few scenes. Of course, I'm being also a little biased because Swampfire is my second favorite alien of all time, and the fact that 2 of my top 5 aliens, actually 3 because Lodestar, if you want to put him in there as well, don't get jack shit in Omniverse really does suck. Even with that said, with his terrible redesign and his lack of utilization, I still find Swampfire to be one of the best aliens Ben has ever had. While these redesigns may not be the worst things to ever grace the franchise, I still think that they're pretty shitty. I won't lie and say out of the 3, I think Chromostone's the one I like the most. In fact, it's grown on me a little bit as I'm making this video. I still think UAF does a better job with his design, but I do see the vision with Chromostone specifically. I don't like Wrath, I think it's really dumb and really corny, and then Swampfire just sucks from a principle standpoint, and it just doesn't really look that good in general anyway. If the design was just himself, then fine, whatever, but the fact that it's Swampfire is the context that really matters. I know Omniverse gets flack for its art style at times. I love the animation, and I really do love a lot of the redesigns of the characters and aliens, but when they redesign in the middle of the show, it just feels so shoehorned and hasty, and I think that's my biggest issue with it besides the cosmetic stuff. Now for Chromostone and Swampfire, they barely appeared, so I guess giving them a redesign isn't the biggest deal, but with someone like Wrath who's appeared in every single season, it just seems so off to me. I honestly wonder what other aliens would have looked like had they have been given different designs in the middle of the show. But as always, I'm always curious to know what you guys think. What did you think of the 3 redesigns? Are you a fan, or do you dislike them? Or do you just not care? Which of the 3 aliens was your favorite of the redesigns and which one was your least favorite? And, honestly, out of curiosity, if you could redesign any alien just for the fuck of it, which alien would you redesign? For me, it'd probably be Upchuck because I fucking don't like Omniverse Upchuck. Honestly, that's my least favorite design in all of Omniverse. I know that's a scalding hot take, but I really fucking hate Perk Upchuck in Omniverse, specifically the 16-year-old one. Another question I'm curious about is that if you had the choice to redesign Rat, Chromos, or Swampfire in your own way, what would you do to change them that is different from what they did in the actual show? Now for Swampfire specifically, I wouldn't really change much. I think UAF Swampfire is peak, but if I had to change anything from Swampfire, I guess more petals. I really do fuck with that part of his design, but I would definitely keep the fact that Swampfire is a more lean, scrawny alien compared to the more muscular build that he gets, because I love the idea that he's super strong. It's just that him being scrawnier feels a lot more unique, because even though that's like a build you see for a lot of aliens, Swampfire makes it feel different enough. For Rat, I wouldn't mind him having clothes, but I would do something similar to 5YL where he just has the pants. I think that actually looks pretty decent, but the whole wrestler uniform is just so cheesy. And then for Chromostone, I actually love the idea of extra spikes, but I would also add some crystal stuff around his arms to make him look like he's wearing the gear that Magna Angemon wears from Digimon. But like I said, I'm curious to what you guys would do to change your designs if you wanted to. I appreciate you guys for stopping by, and as always, happy night hunting.